Here's a list of my top 5 obvious cooking hacks. Number 1 is learn how to substitute. And by that, I mean learn how to substitute ingredients in and out of dishes. And that way you learn how to cook when you don't have all the ingredients for a recipe. And I think a lot of people get constrained by the idea that you have to have every ingredient in the recipe to make a dish. But in reality, a lot of things can be interchanged for other things. And oftentimes, if you're hungry enough, if you omit one thing, you're not going to notice. And if you do, it just means that it was important and that's something to take note of. And so as you learn to swap out ingredients, it'll make you a faster cook because you don't have to worry about having every single ingredient, and you'll just think in your head, okay, what's going to taste good in here because I've learned to trade out ingredients and now I actually know what I like and what tastes good and what pairs well together. So when you go to cook, it's not so much mental effort to look at the recipe and to make sure that you've gone to the grocery store and bought all the ingredients. You're just like, okay, I've got the main ingredients for this dish, and then maybe I'll try a new herb or like a different spice on my meat or whatever. So it just teaches you how to swap out ingredients and how to make the best out of what you have, which ultimately serves you as a chef in the long term. My second obvious cooking hack is one that I see a lot of people struggle with, and that is preheating your pan. I know it can be really hard sometimes when you're coming home from work and you just really need to whip something up quick and you don't really think and you just want to put stuff in that cold pan. But trust me, it'll save you time in the long run. You can just start your pan as soon as you get into the kitchen on a medium heat. It'll give you enough time while you're prepping the rest of your ingredients to let it heat up and come to temperature. And then you can add a little bit of oil in and a little bit of butter, and it'll just give you this really nice sear. And honestly, it'll save you time in the long run because there won't be that gross stuff that burns onto the pan that you have to spend 10 minutes scrubbing out at the end of the night. So it's really important to start preheating your pan. My third obvious cooking hack is sharpen your knives. A lot of people think that it's more dangerous to have a sharp knife because the risk of cutting yourself is higher with a sharper knife. While in reality, if you have a sharp knife and learn how to hold it and use it properly, which I could go into in another video, you'll learn that you can execute cutting maneuvers and preparing food in a much more routine way, and therefore it's safer because you are predictable, you can slice where you want, and as long as you're paying attention, that sharp knife is going to do its job better, and therefore in combination with your skills, the sharp knife is going to lead to faster cooking and safer cooking, because with a blunt knife, sometimes you'll try to do something and the knife will slip off of the vegetable or meat because it's not sharp enough to cut through, and that's when most people tend to get cut, is when the knife doesn't do what they predict it to do. And so it's super important to keep your knife sharp, and if you notice that you're tending to saw through things when you should be pressing and sliding through, then it's really time to start sharpening your knives. Plus, if you take good care of your knives and they're nice and sharp, they just look pretty and it's more satisfying, and you can display them when people come into your home. My fourth obvious cooking hack is a hack that makes cooking easier and more fun, and that has to do with the cleaning and how you make dishes. A lot of times I used to get frustrated as a kid because I would come into the kitchen and I'd be grateful that my mom cooked dinner, but I'd be like, why did you use so many pans? Now we have to clean all of these pans. And so of course, thank you, Mom, for making me dinner. But I think the lesson to be learned is that if you can find a way to use minimal ingredients, or not minimal ingredients, but to use minimal utensils and cutlery as you're cooking, that means using the same knife and the same cutting board for as many things as possible and cooking things in 1 to 2 pans rather than 5 or 6, you'll find that at the end of the night, you won't have as much to do and you can spend more time eating with your family or your loved ones, or just doing other things that don't involve spending half an hour at the end of your meal cooking. And my other caveat to that is a lot of the times you're sitting idle while you're cooking, and that's a great time to start looking around the kitchen being like, okay, I can start picking up this cutting board and this bowl that I use to scramble eggs and wash them. And really, half the time I make breakfast and I scramble eggs in a bowl, put them in the pan, and then by the time the eggs are done, the bowl is dry and I can use it for my food again. And so it's just I'm not taking a bunch of stuff out of the cabinets. I'm not filling up the dishwasher every time. There's a lot of ways that you can just be like, okay, this stuff isn't really just, it doesn't actually dirty. It doesn't need to be washed. And you can reuse it and use minimal utensils, and it makes the mess at the end of the meal a lot more manageable. Okay, for our fifth and final obvious hack, we're coming full circle. And the fifth hack is to master genres of food. And that way you can build from basics to elevate your food. And what I mean by this is start by picking one genre of food that you really like. That could be Italian, it could be Mediterranean, it could be stir fry or pizza, and just start by mastering what are the basic ingredients. So for a pizza, what do you really need to make it a pizza? You need a dough base, which is a flour base, or you could choose to do something more gluten-free if you like. And then there's usually a sauce base. And a lot of people think, well, this has to be red sauce. But in reality, there's many different sauce bases. There's white sauce bases, there's pesto bases, and then there's often red sauce bases. And so by that, I just mean develop the basics of what it takes to pull together some type of cuisine and genre of food. And then you can work, once you understand what goes into that kind of food, it gives you all this freedom to experiment with new things and try new dishes. So once you figure out what goes in a pizza, you're like, oh, I want to make my own pizza rolls. It becomes so much easier, and you don't have to go be like, I better look up a recipe to make pizza rolls. You're like, well, logically, all I really need is some dough and my favorite sauce and a topping, and I can roll them up and make a little pizza roll and stick it in the oven, or a big roll and make a calzone, right? And so there's a lot of ways that you can start to develop sauces and different bases to a lot of, like a wide variety of foods. And for example, if you stick in the Italian sphere with pizza, you can use the sauce information and the kind of like ingredient pairing I talked about in substituting to start experimenting with pastas and other Italian dishes that make cooking just a little bit quicker and a little bit more fun and more creative. And so I would say just focus on learning genres first and types of cuisine, and then building those cuisines up, and you'll find that your repertoire of recipe lists grows exponentially. One more bonus hack for this video. And initially I was thinking, I was like, okay, I discovered how to dice onions in one of the quickest ways a couple years ago, and it changed my life. But there's a lot of things like cutting onions by leaving the root on so you can like slice it nice and thin and then come across and dice it, that you can apply to cooking all foods, and especially vegetables. There's many different ways, whether it's rubber banding your ingredients like they come from the grocery store, and you can cut salad greens super efficiently that way, and or making sure that the simple things are being done, like when you go to cut carrots, you want to cut them in half so you have a flat surface and they're not rolling out of your hands. So that's my bonus hack, is just think of the ways that you can make cutting ingredients and preparing ingredients quicker, and it'll make the food preparation process more satisfying and more appealing because it doesn't seem like so much work to prep things for a dish.